Welcome back to Chamber Exchange, the TV show. I want to thank our sponsors for helping make it happen as we begin 2024. That's Bank Hometown, who've been a long-time supporter and sponsor of the show, and we welcome this year as well St. Vincent Hospital for joining us. And in our final segment of Chamber Exchange, the TV show, we have Dr. Tasia Cerezo, who is the leader and operator of Meryl's Safe Haven. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Tim.
Yeah. So, at the Chamber, we, put a lot of focus on behalf of our members and in response to their needs, working on issues of workforce and development. And it's really, and we work with our public schools, we work with various job training programs, organizations that get support from the federal and state level that focus on workforce development and training, unemployed, underemployed populations. Yep. And part of our message to our members, especially in every sector, is that if they want to meet and address their employment needs, it's not maybe like in past days where you put an ad in the newspaper or online and people show up. You've really got to be proactive and reach out to as many groups as possible. Right. And I think increasingly businesses are recognizing that they need to do that. And to get people working. And Meryl's Safe Haven, and we'll get into it, maybe you could talk a little bit about what Meryl's Safe Haven is, and then we can kind of tie into some of the work that you're doing with the population that you work with.
Absolutely. So I would also like to say what an important point you made. I just transitioned out of workforce development, focused on young people, and it is a missed population. It's a population that we don't tap into, but we know that they're the next folks in the workforce, right, and they need some valuable skills. So Meryl Safe Haven is an organization that looks to provide shelter to families. But at our basis, our foundation, what we created to do was provide shelter and wraparound services for young people aging out of the foster care system. And so again, a population that is often untapped into. They transition out of foster care without a safety net. And some people say, well, they had an opportunity to receive additional support. But when you think about this population and some of the trauma that they are also exposed to, I think I would leave too. And you look for an opportunity to find someone to provide support, and that's what Meryl Safe Haven is going to do for young people. That's our mission. And
so, in the population you're talking about, Department of Children and Families, run by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and they work with, young people and families who oftentimes are in very challenging situations. Right. There are issues of economic issues, poverty. There's issues, tragically, of abuse and things. And so those young people, and sometimes in family units, sometimes individually, are placed with foster families into various programs. And when you're worrying about, where you're going to sleep at night and your next meal, it's hard to think about school. It's hard to think about maybe what you want to be when you grow up. And what maybe some of our viewers aren't aware of is, at 18, young people are emancipated in the sense that they become adults, but DCF continues to provide services for people beyond 18. And as we know, those are critical years and developments and future and opening eyes, and that's a population particularly that you're doing some work with.
Absolutely, yes. And so again, they have the opportunity to stay with DCF to continue to get some support and services. But as you mentioned, sometimes the trauma, the exposure to things that, an average person aren't exposed to, they make the decision to separate themselves from the system. And with that, they don't have a safety net. So they're, like you said, they don't have any skills necessarily. They don't have phones. They don't have an address. And so when your basic needs aren't met, how do you really step into this place of who I am or what I want to be? Mm-hmm. Some folks, sometimes they've never had anyone talk to them about, what does education look like for me? What does a career look like? Right. And if they are able to land a job, again, that lack of address sometimes is a barrier between that first day and actually being able to land a job.
And so that's a piece of what you do. I mean, oftentimes, the conversation in society can be about college and this expectation, but the fact of the matter is, a significant portion of our young people who graduate from high school or maybe leave high school, they're ready for the workforce now and are not always aware that there are a whole host of programs and resources, both for short-term training and employment placement, longer term, that maybe then can lead to higher ed education ladders. And you help do some of that work in exposing young people and introducing to those opportunities.
Yes, and lucky for me, my doctorate is in education as well. So I was a college advisor, I was a transfer counselor. I taught at the master's level for individuals also looking to engage in nonprofit work to do some of the things that we're doing. So that exposure, early exposure, of course, at the age of high school, you begin to trying to figure out what's next for you. But if a young person hasn't had anyone to have that conversation,
Right.
or from my experience as a researcher, hasn't had exposure, a family member has never had a career but a
Right.
job, how do you begin to have those conversations? There is great people doing this work in the city. I would say mass hires. They work with Commonwealth Corporation in the way of youth works.
Right.
And so there are so many training opportunities, but also opportunities to get paid hands-on experience. And that is the work we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and you brought up Mass Hire, and again, for our viewers, both individuals, there may be viewers who have, family members who are unemployed or underemployed, but Mass Hire also works with the employer community.
Absolutely.
And it's under the State Secretariat of Labor and Workforce Development. Every region of the state has a Mass Hire office, and
Yep.
the Mass Hire of Central Mass is based in Worcester, but serves most of Worcester County. They
Yep.
work closely with Workforce Central, and they do a lot of these job training, exposure. They access federal and state dollars to kind of do trainings, work with organizations and groups like yourself to go out and get the word out and plug people, young people in Meryl Safe Haven's particular instance, but also the people who may be older, transitioning, may have a layoff.
Yeah.
So they were a great resource.
Yeah, I would add that because we are also seeing such an increase in homelessness, they are reaching out to shelters as well. So one of the gaps that Meryl Safe Haven is providing support to immediately is we're providing emergency assistance to families through the SafeNet dollars from United Way and HLC because there's immediate need there. And so what the Mass Hire is also doing is stepping into those spaces for folks who are underemployed or underskilled and saying we have dollars to provide support, to provide training, and we're going to be a part of that as well.
Right. And Meryl Safe Haven, if people want to learn more about how you're working with families and individuals, how you're working with the older adult population that's kind of aged out, but still looking to access some services from DCF, how can they learn more and support what you're doing?
The best way is to go to our website. MerylSafeHaven.com is how we keep folks up to date. And if you're interested in learning more about generally nonprofit, we're blogging the journey. And again, as someone who teaches a master's level course, there's so many things that just are not textbook. Mm-hmm. And I've learned so much along the way. So putting into writing for folks who are saying, I don't know where to start, but I want to be a part of the solution, that's what we're doing as well.
Right. Well, Dr. Tasia Cerezo, thank you for coming on and talking a little bit about Meryl's Safe Haven, and really, again, given employer needs and the shortage of workers, we really need to be doubling down, working across the spectrum to make sure that all people, particularly our young people, know that there's some great programs and careers, and that sounds like a big part of your work.
Well, thank you for having me.